Hello guys, today we're going to be looking into Kerberos Authentication. Um, we saw a couple of other videos where we saw how we could use Kerberos with LDAP, but today Kerberos, just like any other authentication protocol, there are just quite a couple of them. You have Kerberos, you have LDAP, you have Radius. All of them are they're used for authentication. And one thing about these three I just mentioned is they kind of have a centralized database for authentication. Means that you have users in a particular centralized server, and they gain access to resources after being authenticated through that server. So we're going to go through kind of some basic understanding of Kerberos, and at the end we are going to see how we can install and configure Kerberos for using Postgres. See how we can use that to authenticate to Postgres. Okay, now the next thing here is Kerberos. Basically, it's the name itself comes from a Greek type of methodology, which just stands for Cerberus, which is actually a three-headed dog that guards the gates to the underworld, and with a tail of snakes. So it kind of looks violent. So this some of these engineers from IT from MIT just took that concept and to kind of call it Kerberos. And if you look at the fact that it has they took this dog with three heads, and it just kind of gives you an illustration of how Kerberos works. So and we're going to look at those three different pieces as they kind of work out here. So Kerberos is kind of a default authentication method. So if you look at Microsoft, if you have even configured Windows LDAP, you will discover that Kerberos is it's already it's already part of it. So and today we're going to be looking at Kerberos installation on Linux. So this is just going to be a Linux platform. Um, yeah, so we're just going to use this on Linux. So there are a couple of terminologies which I want us to look into when it comes to Kerberos, and these are some of the things that we really need to understand if we, working with Kerberos, or we have to set up Kerberos. One of the main thing first is the RAM, which is just the equivalent of a domain or group, that all users and servers belong to. So we're going to be using a particular RAM here called hop2, and all the users will belong to this particular RAM. And there are instances where you can have multiple RAMs, and we're going to see that later on. This might not really make sense to people who, somebody who hasn't really kind of gone deeply into understanding Kerberos and some of these keywords. I'm just kind of touching on the highlight, but during the configuration, I hope it will make sense to you. So we have principal, which are just basically users or services as defined, as a principal in Kerberos. So basically, what you're saying here is that if you have a user or service in Kerberos, we call it principal, and we're going to see how we can actually add principal to the Kerberos database. And then each time that we want to add, we just call it want to add a user, you say we want to add a principal. And sometimes for this configuration here, we are going to be getting access to a service, which is Postgres, and we're going to see how that plays out. So one next thing is instance. So Kerberos uses instance to manage service principal, and especially for administrative principals. So what they're saying here is that when we install Kerberos, there's going to be an instance, and we're going to see how we will create administrator password for that instance user who will who will manage that Kerberos instance. And because definitely it needs to be secure, and we're going to see that it's just going to be for, in order to manage all those services that we have there. KDC, which is our key distribution center, contains a database and all principals and two components. So now when we add, as we already mentioned earlier, when we add users, they're all in the KDC, and this KDC contains the database. This database houses all the users that you add into the KDC server. And that is why if you have to authenticate using Kerberos, those users must be in that database. Right. And this KDC, is kind of divided into two. You have the authentication server, which is just basically responsible for initial authentication request, and we're going to see that because when you have a user in that database, and you issue a request, it has to hit the authentication server first, and we're going to explain all that, how it goes down. The next thing is the ticket granting server, which assigns the requested resource, on the service server to the users. Now, when we create those users in the KDC, what happens is that those users are the end goal is to actually access a particular resource. That resource might be on a different server. So that's the main goal, to access that resource. So we have the ticket granting server that will actually, assign those service tickets to those users. And we're going to see how that really works. Then we have the ticket granting ticket. Now, ticket granting ticket is kind of different. It's not. I'm not saying it's all part of the KDC, but it's just a message that is used to confirm the identity of a principal, and the ticket granting ticket comes from the KDC, and we're going to see how all of this plays out. So when you try to, first of all, want to authenticate to Cabarrus, when it hits the KDC through the authentication server, you are issued a ticket granting ticket, right? And you use that ticket granting ticket to get access to the ticket granting server, and which we're going to see later on. Then the next most important one is, anyway, all of them are important, but in order for us to be able to have access to our resource, which might be our Postgres running on a different instance, we'll need to extract a Keytop file, right? So it just contains encryption key for a service or a host. And we're going to see that it is through this Keytop file that the service ticket issued by the ticket granting server can be recognized, right? And then we'll have our client, which is our workstation, which we use that client to have to gain access to a particular service server. So we're going to see that because we're going to have a KDC, we're going to have our service server, and we're going to have the client, right? So it will kind of make sense when we go into a couple of things right here. So this is actually how the entire diagram of this is just giving you an illustration of how Kerberos actually works. So what happened with Kerberos is that, take for example here that this is a client here. On the far left here, I have the client, and here, this is my KDC. I'm just taking all of this to be the KDC. And this is my application server, or the service, whatever service that you want to authenticate to. So these are the three pieces here. You have the client here, you have the KDC, and you have your application server right here. Now, how does it work? When you are the client here and you want to gain access to your end goal, this client's end goal is to have access to application server here. In our case, let's just say it's Postgres running here. Now, what happens is that the client, and the key role of Kerberos is to avoid you actually sending your actual password across the line. All right. So how does it do that? Firstly, let's take, for example, that we're talking about Caroline here. Let's say we've created and added Caroline into the KDC database. Let's call this a KDC database. Here, for example, we have Caroline here with his password. His password is known in the KDC. And this is how Kerberos works. With Kerberos, only two people know the password. The KDC knows the password, and you, the user, know the password. No, nobody else is aware of that password. So when you create a user in the KDC in the KDC database, that user basically you assign that user a password. So take for example, we have Caroline, we have Tyler, and we have Jack. Now let's consider that Caroline is here on her laptop and she needs to get access to Postgres here. Now, how does it work? Now, when Caroline is here, and one thing we'll see later on is that when we install Kerberos server here, we also need to have a client, right? We also need to have a client as well. Now, when Caroline here issues an authentication request, when it issues a request, right? So when it sends that request that, oh, I want to connect. Now, that request, first of all, hits the authentication server, as we saw earlier on. The authentication server will look up that particular user inside the database. And when it looks up that user in the database and confirms the password, what happens now is that if everything goes well, the authentication server responds back to Caroline with a ticket granting ticket. Now, it doesn't mean that it responds with the password. I'm just trying to cut things short here because there's a lot of encryption and a lot of things that goes on here. I'm just kind of really explaining it on the fly, not going into because there are kind of some really critical, deep details here. Now, when Caroline issues a request to connect, what happens that request hit the authentication server. The authentication service looks up that on inside the database. If it confirms the password, it responds with a ticket granting ticket. Now, this ticket granting ticket is not sufficient enough to gain access to the application server. What she needs to do here is that when she receives that ticket granting ticket, the next point is she will need to pass that ticket granting ticket along with the request to access the server. Now, when she passed that ticket granting ticket along with her request now is hitting the ticket granting service. Now, the ticket granting service is what will now issue her the service ticket. But she needs to send that request together with the ticket granting ticket that she obtained in the first in the first illustration. So when she passed that ticket granting ticket along to the ticket granting server, the ticket granting server evaluates that, do some decryption, looks it up into the database, and then if everything works well, the ticket granting server responds back with the service ticket. Now, this service ticket that Caroline receives here now, she cannot decrypt this service ticket. This service ticket can only be decrypted by the application. Now, the next thing is that she's going to send across now her application request along with the service ticket, right? When she sends the aspiration request along with a service ticket, that service ticket is now decrypted by the application, and everything works well. She gains access. So that is just in a nutshell how Kerberos actually works and how it does authentication. So it's kind of really secure. And one thing we must know about Kerberos authentication here is that these tickets that are received have a lifespan. So it's not like you receive a ticket and you can use the ticket for the whole year. I think by default it's 7 days or 24 hours, but we're going to see that. But you can actually set how long you want that particular, the lifespan of that service ticket to last. And we're going to see how that really plays out. So this is everything we've just explained earlier on here. We have the domain controller here. This domain controller is just our KDC, right? Which I've explained. And inside the KDC, we have the authentication service, and we have the ticket granting service here, where we also have our database inside the domain controller. Now you have the client here, and you have let's say application server here, which is, let's say, Postgres. Now, and this is how we're going to have it. So we're going to have three servers. This one KDC server, one the client server, and one which will be holding Postgres. So this is how the client works. The client, first of all, sends the client request an authentication ticket. So he requests that. Then secondly, as you see here, the KDC verifies the credential and sends back an encryption ticket just as I was explaining before. When it sends it back now, the fourth point is that the client stores a TGT, and when it expires, the local session manager will request another TGT. Just as I was explaining earlier, all these tickets they have an expiring date. So if it expired, you need to request another one. The next point is that the client sends the current TGT to the ticket granting server, which with the service principal name, which is the SPM of the resource and the client want to access. So you're now sending your service, your your service ticket, and then together with your request to the ticket granting server, you know, to which sending that request, which will now issue you a service ticket. So the TGS sends a valid session key for the service to the client. So that's what I was talking about. It sends now that session key, and you cannot decrypt that session key. Now the client now forwards the session key to the service for access. So that is how all this first of all works on between the domain controller and the client, and then before the last step it forwards and get authenticated here. So it's kind of really secure. Now, Postgres actually supports GSS API, which is just a generic service application program interface, which can works with which, because our end goal here is to authenticate with our service, which will be Postgres. And what happens here is that Postgres, actually support the GSS PI, and we're gonna see that which uses Kerberos. So by default, when you compile Postgres for the newly Postgres now, which you install, maybe you're using enterprise version of Postgres, it's kind of already compiled with GSSPI, which uses Kerberos, and that is what we're going to use. So, but if it's not compiled with that, you can actually compile it and say compile with, you put, you specify those libraries for GSSPI. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So the next thing here is we're going to see that when we finish configuring Kerberos and we need to actually authenticate into Kerberos, there are a couple of flags that we can specify. Especially, we're going to see this when we're specifying that inside the pghpa.conf file of Postgres. And this include RAM equals to 1, as we mentioned earlier, that the RAM is just a domain, that users belong to. So we're going to see that you can have, as I mentioned earlier, you can have multiple of those RAMs. So by default, this include RAM is set to 1, so that each of the principal that is getting authenticated, they should kind of provide their RAM, and we're going to see that. And this is just so because it's so that you might have the same users that belong to different RAM, so if you have, let's say, John that belong to, let's say, Hub2, and another John who belongs to, let's say, another RAM called myvnc.com, they will actually provide the RAM associated with that. And we're going to see that, which is we're going to use this equals to 1 map. We're going to see there are different ways in which you can also map users, and we're going to see that when you're creating users, you can create users in this format, and you can map them even using the pg ident file in PostgreSQL, which you can, you know. But for this demo, we're not going to do the mapping. We're just going to just show you how we can use that. And we're going to use this include RAM, and we're going to use KRB RAM. So this sets the RAM to match user principal names against. So what happens here is that, okay, let's say we're using a particular RAM called Hub2. So it will mean that all users that belong to this particular RAM should be allowed to connect. So we cannot specify that particular RAM. We're going to see that in action, which will really make some sense. So there are a couple of other different command line tools with Kerberos which we are going to use. Basically, we will use almost all of this, yeah, for this demo. So the KD admin, is just the KDC database administration should use to manage principal and policy. So we're going to see how we can manage the KDC server. You want to log in there, will have to type KD admin to log in and all of that. So KInit is used to obtain and cache the Kerberos ticket granting ticket. Remember, we said that when a user needs to obtain to get access, the user sends an AS request, and that AS request, to obtain the TGT. Now, in order to do that, to obtain your TGT, you need to issue this command KInit, right? And when you obtain and you cache that particular TGT, so we're going to see how a user obtain the TGT and cache that TGT. And one thing we're going to see here is that, let's say John obtained the TGT, cache the TGT. Mary cannot use that TGT that was being cached by John. So you will need to clear the cache, before you can be able to, obtain your own cache. Because during the process of obtaining the cache, you need to validate yourself. K-list is used to list the principal and ticket held in the credential cache, and we're going to see that when we obtain that particular credential, we can list them to see them when they're being cached. You can use the K-list to see them. K2til here is used to read, write, and edit the entries in the Keytop file. Remember, we said we're going to extract the Keytop file from the KDC, and we're going to send that Keytop file to our application server. And that is what our service ticket is we're going to use to get access to that for that principal. So we can actually read, write or edit the Keytop file using this tool. The KDF5 utility enables you to create, dump, load, destroy, the Kerberos version 5 database. So that's just some of the things we're going to see here. So let's move ahead. So that's mostly what I wanted to show you here on this little slide. We're going to just jump right down into our demo here, and we will see exactly how this thing plays on. Okay, so I'm gonna try to be a little bit, oops, uh, gonna have a demo here. Okay, sorry. Now, this is as I mentioned earlier, we have three servers here. This is just going to be our KDC. This is going to be our application server, and this is going to be our client. All right. Let me just put it this way. So we have our KDC, our client, and this is going to be our application server. So we're going to start first with the configuration of the KDC. So let's log into the KDC. Let's see. Oh, password wrongly. Okay, so let's open up the terminal here and let's kind of make this a little bigger. So some people will see that. I think that's fine. And if we look at those servers that we have here, both of them, these are the servers we have here. So we have a KDC, which is, and this is a RAM we have here, and we're going to use that as RAM. This is our KDC server, this is our database server, this is our client server. So all of them are running on different hosts, okay? So the first thing which we are going to do here is I always like to, I'm not gonna, let me check if my firewall is running. I'm not gonna use firewall here. Let me see. Firewall D. Okay, I'm just gonna stop this firewall for this demo. So that I'm gonna stop the firewall here. Oops, cancel. I'm not logging as root yet. Okay, password. Okay, system CTL status firewall D system. I'm just gonna stop the firewall here. So I'm just gonna stop the firewall now. You see the firewall is stopped so that in your environment, you might just need to allow those particular ports or whatever you have, to connect. But in this case here, I'm just gonna stop the firewall. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do here is we're going to install the Kerberos. Excuse. We're going to install the Cabarrus KRB5. That's the version 5. We're going to just run yum install that, install those packages there. Why is it refusing to install? Something is wrong here. Let me check. We have a yum lock here. Let me clear out this guy. Sometimes kind of annoying. I hate this. Let me run it again. Oh. Um, yeah, so it looks like I don't have some mirrors here for this server. There's something wrong here. I think I have. Hold on. Let me check something first. Let me check if this server is connected to the internet. It should be. Can resolve some of that. I just want to verify here. Yeah. Sometimes. Let me see. Yeah, looks like we have an internet connection. We do have internet connection, so okay. I think we have internet connection. Let me just close this. Let me just close this right here. Oh, come on. Close. What's going on? Let's close this. Okay. This should work. It keeps having a yum lock here. Why? Uh, Let me see something. I gotta kill this. Yum install release. I think I will need to disable this yum package here. Something is wrong with this machine. You can't. Okay, I'm gonna try something here. Let me open up the client and see if something is, if the client is okay. Oops. Oh, just extend this. Hmm. Oh, okay. Uh, Let me just use this client like this and see. Zoom in. Let me see if anything is wrong with this client. Let me just see. Install Apple release. Release. This is weird. HTTP error. Yeah, I got some issues going on there. What's going on? Sometimes this package is etc/yum.post. the and yeah, let me see. No mirror fly planet error HTTP. Mm, yeah, there's something wrong with okay, let me just hold on to this and yeah, kind of pause the meeting a little bit. Just wanted to get through of this package kit issue here. And this is some of the things that you might encounter when you're running with when you're doing this stuff. So what I'm going to do is, let me see again. Yum install is still giving me this crap issue here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to roughly kill this process here. And I'm going to check if systemctl, gonna check if package kit is running. It should be the guy for my demo here. I'm gonna get rid of this. Oh, it's running. I'm gonna stop this package kit here. Kind of sometimes annoying, and some reason I'm just gonna some systemctl. I'm gonna remove it. Package kit. I'm gonna remove every package of it. Let me see. Cool. Package kits. Systemctl remove. Oh, look at what I'm doing. This is yum remove. Sorry. Gonna get rid of the thing. Package kit module not available. Okay, that's fine. Um, I'm gonna run yum clean all. I'm gonna clean this thing. Let me run it. Try it again now. I think now it should work. Yum install API release. Yeah, I think we should be back up. Yeah. Okay, so we should be back up. Let's hop on here. The year should be fine already. So yeah, clean out. Okay. Okay. I think we should be back up now. Sorry for that. Sometimes, demos can be crazy, especially when you're doing a live demo. Sometimes something can go wrong. So right now we're going to install the packages for Kerberos and the workspace in the Cabarrus server. Yeah. We hope this time everything runs well. Okay. You should be picking it up now. Okay. Know why it's complaining of some of that. Okay, I think now we should be on a good space now to ride on. So we're gonna say yes. So when Kerberos authentication is finished, there's going to be a file called the kdc.conf. Since we're gonna heading out of time, I'm just gonna edit that file. You see that file in this location. So when you open up the file, the first thing you're going to do is that you're going to uncomment these lines here, and The RAM that we have here is hub2.org, and we're just gonna make sure we add here same thing, hub2.org, and we're gonna leave that master key as it is, and there's a line that we have to add into this file, which would define the default principal flag, which is just which will define that it should pre-authenticate with the KDC server first, which you define it should pre-authenticate with the KDC server first. And that line is adding here, this line here, default principal pre-authent plus pre-authent. So it will authenticate whoever user is running, will pre-authenticate with the KDC server first. That is all we're going to add in this file. We're just going to leave the default ports there as it is, and we're going to save this file. Oops, sorry. We're going to save this file. And there is another file again, which we're going to see, which is our kbr5.com file. And we're going to edit that file as well. And here, this is where sometimes you can define the lifetime of the ticket, as I was explaining earlier on, and we can specify that. Here, we're going to uncomment these lines, and we're going to change the default RAM, a RAM which we already have, which is a hub2. And sometimes you need to make sure you edit these lines appropriately. And here I'm going to just uncomment these lines, and here as well I'm going to uncomment these lines. And over here I'm just going to replace this with my RAM here, and I am going to specify my KDC server, because I already had that. Let me just show you that. So if I cut, sorry, let me expand this view. So if I cut /etc /host, so we're going to see here that we have a KDC server. So I'm going to make sure I put my KDC server here. So that's just putting the host name of my KDC server so that it should know exactly where my KDC server is. And I'm going to do the same thing here. KDC, server. And down here on our default RAM, we're going to edit also as we're supposed to, and you just make sure you edit, and that's why in some configuration you will see that some people might have different type of domain RAMs, and that is why I was explaining earlier on that at some point you will need to specify which RAM is coming from. So there are in certain configurations that when you open this file, you might see that they have other additional RAMs in there. So we're just going to edit this as it is. And I think that should be it for this particular file here. So we're just going to leave the default as I explained, the ticket lifetime, which is 24 hours. You can renew it. It will be renewed in 7 days lifetime. So we're just going to leave everything as it is. And we talked about cache. We're going to see that this is where it's going to cache a ticket. So we can save this file. And you must make sure everything is fine. And we have another file again, which is our access control list file. And we're going to edit this file too as well, just to allow, just to make sure that, administrator user can connect with default privileges there. So we're going to specify our RAM here, which is hub2.org. And that should be fine. We save that. Oops, not caps. We save that. And now that we save that, the next thing we have to do now is we can remember I mentioned earlier that we need to create the Kerberos database, right? and which I mentioned earlier, we will have to create that Kerberos database. So we have to run this command here, which will initialize that database. Remember, we talked about the KRB util 5, which was you can create, drop, load, manage that, and then we specify our RAM here. So we're going to specify the master key. This is you're entering the KDC database master key, which will be encrypted to as well. So I'm specifying my password, and I'm going to run the same password again, and I've set that password. So the next thing you have to do now is to start up those two services, which are the KRB5, KDC, and the KD admin. So they need to be running. So you have to start these services at the same time. If your configuration didn't run well, these services will not start. If you made a mistake with some of those files there, you might have an issue there. So now let's check if the first service is running, the KRB file. Let me just check that. Just do the same here. So I'm just going to change this to status. So it's going to check me both status here. So here we can see two services running. This is the KRB 5 KDC, and we have the KAdmin. These services must be running before you can connect to that database. And that's why we're talking about the instance. We mentioned it earlier on. So one thing you might want to do is you might want to make sure you enable this service so that if in case the server goes down, you know, you can still connect to that. So in order for us to connect to our KDC database, you have to issue this command. Remember, we talked about some of the operating system command, which is the KD admin local. So we hit enter. We connect already, right? It just gives us connection. So we've already connected already. So if we exit, for example, and I just do KD admin, it's gonna ask me for the password, right? Uh, okay, let me see. It's running on the Cabarrus Authentication. Okay, okay, yeah. Okay, okay, yeah. I'm going to demonstrate that later. Yeah. So let's just log in first. So immediately authentication as principal root because we did that already. We specified that. So we log in as KD admin. Okay, now the next thing we are going to do here is that we are going to add a principal. And in order to add a principal, we're just first going to add the root, which is going to be our admin principal. So to do that, you use the add prince, which is adding a principal, right? So we click on enter. It's going to ask us for the password. Uh, we can just add. We're just adding this into the database. We just add yes, and we will need to confirm that. And you will need to, so we confirm that we're entering the password. You see here's that created. So you need to make sure that that principal has been created. Okay. And in this case now, we are going to, you can add multiple principals here, right? Principal, as you remember, we talked about can be a user or it can be a service. So say, for example, I want to add a principal called Benson. I can just do that, put Benson, and then I put Postgres and give a password. So you must make sure that that principal has been created. So in this case now we see that we have the principal there has been created. Now if we want to see this principal that we've created in this database, we can use a command called list and it's going to list us those principal. Remember we added but there are also some default ones, like we have the Caribbean TGT here, everything is still there, the ticket grant 27 and all of that stuff, and we could see Benson here. So we added these two, right? The other ones were just default ones right there. So when you add that's how you can see which users are in the KDC database, by using just list prints. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is that we're going to add a principal for our application server. An application server which we're using is Postgres, right? We want to install Postgres. So what we're going to do is that we're going to grab and this is kind of a little bit different here because we're going to grab the host name where Postgres is running, and we're still going to check on that where Postgres is running, and we're going to come back here, and we're going to run prints add principal. We're going to specify Postgres, and we're going to specify slash, and we put our host name. Right. Remember, we said earlier that it's when you have the principal. I don't know if mentioned that earlier, but it is in this form because it kind of really support the generic security service application programmable interface. So we saw that earlier. So we're going to add principal. We define it to be Postgres. We define our host and specify our RAM there. So we do enter. It's going to ask us for the password for that. We do enter and we specify the password again. Always make sure that it says created. Now we have a couple of principals already inside the KDC. Now, what we need to do now is we need to extract the Keytop file. And remember, I mentioned that the Keytop file is being used in the application server, and that's what we're going to use that there. All right. In order to extract the Keytop file, remember we talked about a tool called command line tool called K2 Util, which is used to create, edit the Keytop file. So we're just going to exit from here, and we're going to use that tool, which is the K2 Util, and we will use that. We log in that command line of K2 Now we can write a Keytop file. Okay. And if we look at here, we're going to say add entry. We're going to specify the password. It will prompt us for the password, and then we'll specify, our application server credentials, and then we'll say, okay, let it try to encrypt this. It's going to use SHA-1, and then we hit enter. It's going to ask us for the password because now it needs to write the Keytop file because we specify that it will create a Keytop file, and we'll add an entry. So we specify the password here. And after this, we specify the password here. Um, the next thing is we will need to write the Keytop file. We can specify a name for the Keytop file. So we're going to write Keytop file. We do enter. And this is the name of the Keytop file we specified here. Okay. So if we exit here and we list this location, we're going to see a Keytop file that we created. This is the Keytop file. So we wrote that Keytop file. We could see that. Okay. And we can still use that same tool as well to read the Keytop file, but that's fine. So at this point here, the next thing we'll have to do here is to copy this Keytop file across to our Postgres server, right? So basically, we're almost done with the configuration of this particular server. So the next thing is to copy this Keytop file across to the Postgres server. All right. So what we'll just do is we're going to SCP that Keytop file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SCP this Keytop file here. I'm going to do SCP Keytop file. I'm going to send it across to the Postgres server. I'm going to put it inside the data directory. All right. So I hit enter. I say yes. I say yes. Specify the password. So my Keytop file has been copied across to the Postgres server. Now, let's jump across now to the Postgres server. Let's leave this and let's go across to the Postgres server right here. Okay. So let's log into our Postgres server. Now let's open up a terminal here, and let's try to increase this a little bit so that we can see. So remember I told you earlier on that when you install Postgres, it comes along with the GSS API. Now here, let's first of all check if we have Postgres running here. Let's check if we have Postgres even installed here. I don't know if I had installed Postgres here. EDB. Okay, we have Postgres 12 here. Yeah, anyway, because I transferred the Keytop file to that location in Postgres. So let's check if it's running. Grab Postgres. Okay, so it shows that Postgres is down. It's not running at the moment. Okay, now remember I mentioned about I said normally when you install Postgres, it kind of it's already compiled with with GSS API. So let's say we want to verify that, and AS12 bin and what is the name of that file again? Okay, let me do edb hyphen postgres hyphen postgres and let me do hyphen configure. What is there? Um, Impossible system privacy documentation on privilege user ID to prevent that. Uh, Let me see. Bin. We're supposed to have this working here. Okay, no. Okay, let me see here. Let me change this to dot pg config. Let me run that. Okay. So I just want to show you that if you're compiling, then there's a possibility for you to include with GSS API. All right, you can do that. But as of now, what we're seeing here is that Postgres has been compiled with GSS API. And how can we check that? Let me see if we can check that. Let me let me try to look at some of the shared objects. We can use the list dynamic dependency. List dynamic dependency. Okay. So if we do a list of this dynamic dependency, we could see here that we have this particular Postgres has been compiled with GSSPI, which is using Kerberos 5. So we are fine. We know that it should work. So it's always good to check. If you don't have that, then you might need to make sure you will need to uh, uh, run another installation or compile using GSSPI, which is good. Okay, so let's move on. Let's switch as Postgres and let's go to our data directory and the PG data. Let's do PWD. Oops, that's something we PG data. So PWD, yeah. Let's list. We're in the data directory right now. I just source that data directory. Um, so we have only the, oh, it shows that this particular server, I did install it, but it's not even initialized. Wow. Okay. It's not even initialized here. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to quickly initialize uh, Postgres 12. So for that, I will need to, let me just remove this Keytop file here. We're going to copy it back. I don't want to have something in there. So let's run another initialization logback as root. USR, EDB, um, AS12, bin, Initialize that will be, we're going to use EDB hyphen AS hyphen 12 hyphen setup, and we're going to specify initdb, yeah. So it's initializing Postgres now. So let's wait that initialize. So we should be fine at this moment. So if we log back as enterprise DB and then we source, we go to the data directory, we list now, we should be able to see our Postgres files there. And let's send back that file, all right? Let's copy back our Keytop file, okay? Let's SCP our Keytop file back across there. So our Keytop file is back there. We go back here. We should be able to see our Keytop file. Okay, this is it. So good. So we have a Keytop file. And always make sure that this Keytop file has a permission of 600. All right, 600 is good. Now that we have a Keytop file here, the next thing we need to do here is we need to open up the postgresql.com file. Postgresql.conf, and we'll need to look for KRB. Let's just search KRB. Now, when you search for KRB, you're going to see the KRB file. So here we will need to specify where that file is. All right. We can decide to specify where the actual file is, edb slash as12 slash data slash postgres dot keytab. So we know that that is where we have our Keytop file, okay? So it's always good to make sure that you have your Keytop file in this particular location, right? So having a Keytop file here, I think we should be good. We just need now to save this. Before that, let me just check if port. Let me just check. Let me just check something here right quick. Oops, sorry. Port. Oh, what the hell am I typing? Uh, Port is 544, listener address is a star. Yeah, fine. So you need to just make sure listener addresses is set to all, or maybe you define your IP addresses because we're going to be connecting on this server remotely. So that's what I just wanted to check. So with everything up and running, the next thing we can do here is just to start Postgres, right? We can run systemctl, start Postgres. Um, Let me just run that as root, okay? Systemctl start edb hyphen as 12 service. Start that, make sure it's running. Make sure it's running, and we should see a green light. Okay, green light, you're good. Let's log back in as Postgres here, and we should be good. Let's try to connect to the database. Oh, I might need to set the bash profile. So I think I have a copy of that. I'm kind of always just, let me just, I know I have a bash profile here now, but sometimes I don't want to use that. I'm just gonna truncate this file and I'm gonna put mine here. Oops, vi, and I'm gonna put that. Everything should be fine. And I'm gonna source this file, and I think I can connect now. Okay, I'm in. All right, now that you're in, we can try to see if our Keytop file is set to actual location. We tried to see that particular parameter earlier. So we see that it's set. That's fine. So now the next thing you're going to do here is that you need to set your PGHBA conf file. All right. we need to set up pghba conf file. So let's vi pghba conf. Now, this is something I want to show here. I think this GSSPI start is being supported. Kerberos is being supported. I think it's from Postgres 12. I don't think Postgres 10 does support that. When you open Postgres 12, you will see this GSS. So you need to make sure that when you open your PGHBA file, it should be able to support GSS. I know. I don't think 10 does. 10 and below, 11 and below. I thought it should start from 12. So you just need to verify to make sure it supports GSS, right? And then if it supports GSS, we are going to specify entry into this file here for host. So we are going to define host here, which which we will define, and we're just going to go ahead and define that host here. Okay, and this is why we're going to define it. We're going to be using GSS, and we just say all enterprise DB. But you might want to, in this case, you might want to change the user that we have. Okay, since I have a user in the KDC called Benson, I might want to just put Benson here. We're going to test that. So we're going to leave, you know, connection from this IP address range, and we're using GSS. So you need to make sure you specify GSS. Include RAM, we're going to just leave include RAM to 0, and we're going to specify KRB RAM that the users must belong to connect, and we're going to specify this. For now, we're just going to leave that. And for clarity, just to make sure that you know it, I'm just going to do something here, right? Just to show you that our connection must come from there, so that you don't think that we have an entry here and it's not working. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna comment out all of this. All right. And I'm gonna just leave this one. I know it looks weird, but I just want to show you that it must go through here. All right. So let me save this, and let me do systemctl reload. Okay. I've reloaded my file. All right. Now we're done with with our KDC server. We're also done with our Postgres server, which are application server. The next thing is to go to our client server. So we need to go to our client machine. So on our client machine here, we need to log into our client machine. Okay. And on our client machine here, okay, this is when I was doing that testing. I might not really need this right now. So I'm first going to make sure I stop firewall here too as well. Okay, just going to stop firewall here. And just for clarity, I hope I stopped it on the Postgres server here. Let me just stop that here too as well. Systemctl stop firewall D. So just stop that firewall there. And on a client machine, what we're going to do here is that we need to install the Cabarrus workstation here, which is basically a client. And the reason for which you need to have Cabarrus here is because note that that particular client is going to send an authentication request to the KDC server. And what happens is that that authentication request that his user is sending is being sorted. The password is being sorted in the same way that the KDC server sorted. So it needs to have, those KRB packages there. And after that has been done, after we install those packages there, we don't actually need anything. All we need is to bring across that krb5.com file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the krb5.com file from the from the KRB server, from the KDC into the client. Remember the KRB5 com file which we edited in this in the KDC. I will copy that over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say SCP and I'm going to say go over to the KDC server and copy this file and bring it to this path here. All right. So I'm going to hit enter. So I'm going to specify the password. So everything goes well. It has been copied. So let's go into that location and make sure that it's there. So if we just VI this file, right, we should be able to see that file there. Okay. So remember we edited this file. So I've just copied this file from the KDC over here. And the reason why I bring this file over here is that this is the client. And this client need to authenticate to the KDC to obtain the TGT and the service request. So what will tell the client where the KDC is running is because this file has, the host name of the KDC. So you need to bring this file here on the client, and that is just all what you need to do. And that is just it. You install the Kerberos client here, and then you copy that KRB5 com file into the client. So after we've copied that file into the client, I think we should be basically done right now. All right. Um, So what we can do now is let's try to test. Now, the thing here is that let's try to test if we can be able to obtain TGT from there. Remember, I know I have a particular user in the KGs in the KDC server. And remember, I talk about the K init. So I'm going to use the K init. I'm going to say Benson. Now, when I do K init Benson means that I am issuing an authentication request. This is the first step at which I'm doing. So when I hit enter, what it's doing is that it realizes that and it's trying to authenticate to the KDC server. Then I'm going to put the password. Now, the password has already been sorted because I have the Kerberos client here. So now when I put my password, it's going to verify, it's going to do the verification in the KDC server, verify against the database. Everything works well. It's going to send me now my ticket granting ticket. So if I press enter, so if everything works fine, I'm not seeing any error, it shows that I've obtained the TGT. Now let me use the K list. Remember we talked about K list. We said K list is used to kind of list those credentials that have been obtained from the KDC and cached. So we list that. We're going to see here very well that I have obtained a ticket granting ticket from the KDC, and it tells me exactly the validity of that particular ticket, as we mentioned earlier. Now, I have these tickets here. Now, I will need now to obtain the service ticket, and I will pass that service ticket across to my application to be able to connect. Now, it's going to do this on the fly too as well. Okay. Now, if we try now, since we've been able to obtain this ticket from the KDC and authenticated to the KDC, let's try now to connect to our database. Now, if we try now to connect to our database here, now look at what is happening. Let me say I do PSQL and I put this is where my database is running, which is running on this other server, but I'm here on the client. So what happened is that the connection has authenticated from the KDC server, and then I obtain it, and then I'm taking that to now authenticate to my application, which is running here. So you see my connection now. I want to connect to the database to where it's running in this database server as the user Benson, because I've obtained the TGT for Benson, right? If I hit connect now, oh yeah, we don't have PSQL. So for your client, you need to install the PSQL utility. Okay. So what we can do is to have PSQL. PSQL is it's just a utility, but we can install that application. Okay. You don't need to have any database running here. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to run um, that. Get my EPA release package, and I'm gonna get my RPO, my repo EDB repo file. Okay, Okay, and with that now, I'm going to copy my EDB repo from the EPAS server. Okay, I'm going to copy my EDB repo from the EPAS server and bring it over here. Okay, I'm going to copy that EDB repo file. Okay, and the next thing I will now install. I will now install Advanced Server 12. But I'm not going to start the server. All I'm in doing the installation is because I want to have my Ps4 package. All right. I just want to have the Ps4 package. That's it. That's all I want to have there. Okay. I think that should be done in a minute. That should be done in a minute. There. Okay. Okay. Just give it a couple of minutes. It should be done. Okay, we should be done. We're done here now. So we have a Ps4 utility. So if we run this command now, it's telling us that there is no role for Benson. Now, even though this is one thing I want to mention here, even though we have a user, um, even though we have a user inside the KDC server and we've already authenticated to the KDC server, that is where Benson is in the KDC server. We need to have that user also in the database. So we need to go to the database and create that user, right? So because we don't have Benson inside the database, so we just connect to the database here, and we're gonna say create user Benson with super user. I'm just gonna make it a super user, okay? This is just a demo. Note here that I created Benson without a password. I didn't give a password. And now my password, my credential should come from the KDC. All right. So let me go back to my client and test my connection again. You see, now I'm able to connect. Now you see how the connection goes, and it tells here GSAPI encrypted connection. So this is how you're able to use Kerberos to authenticate to Postgres. It tells you that this connection is GSSPI encrypted. And there is actually a particular um, um, that is, if you want to see that this connection is encrypted, if we run a command like select, if we try to run select PID comma and then we select GSS, if to check if it's GSS authenticated. Oh, sorry, GSS authenticated, and we want to select if it's encrypted because we do have a particular view called the PG start GSS PI, right? And then we're going to select the principal. Sorry, principal. We're going to select the principal, and we're going to do that from this particular view because there is a view that gives us all that information that we're looking for, GSS API, all right? Where we're going to pull out the PID. We're going to look for that PID. We're going to call it to look for that PID from the backend. So it's going to pull out that particular, oops, kind of, okay, from the backend, right? I'm going to call this PID function here. So if we run this, now you're able to see that we have, this is the PID, and it's a, is it GSS or GSS authenticated? True, is GSS. Is it encrypted? So we know two things here, that this connection is GSS authenticated and it is also encrypted, and it tells us the principal where it's coming from. So this is how you set up a Kerberos authentication with Postgres. And remember, I mentioned something. We have another user. For example, I want to give an example here. For example, if I go over to the KDC server and I add a user, now, for example, let me just create a user, right? And let me go over to the server, to the Postgres server here. This is my Postgres server. I log into the server. I create a user. So let me just run create a user, and let me call this user, let me call it EDB user, right? Now I've created this user, okay? This user is in the database. Note very well, I have this user in the database. This user is not yet in the KDC server. If I go across to the client and I try from the client to issue a connection using that EDB user, it is going to fail. It's going to tell me that no PGA or no PG no PGHBA entry for that particular user. Yes, which is true because we have only Benson there. Now let's go and fix that and see what happens. Now let's see where we are. Let's go across to out here and let's VI the PGHBA. And for example, if we decide to add an entry for that user, no problem. Let's just add an entry for that user here. And let's say EDB user. Oops, I'm doing caps. EDB user. Okay, let's save this and let's reload. CTL reload. Okay, now we've reloaded. If we come over and try to test the connection again, let's go back to our client. Earlier, I was telling us about no HBA. Let's try it again. Now you see that the error has changed. We fixed the issue of the HBA. Now it's telling us that GSSPI authentication failed for that user. And these are some of the common errors that some people have, and it will tell you this. And the reason why it's giving you this is because it cannot validate that user. All right. Now, what we're going to do here is that we're going to add this user, EDB user, into our into our KDC. Now, let's jump over to our KDC server. Okay. Let's let's log into our KDC server, and let's run kadmin .local. We're in our KDC server. Let's add Prings. Let's add Prings. It should be double add. Let's add Prings, and we say EDB user. Let's add this user into the KSDC. We provide the password, and now the user has been created. If we list Prings, we see that we just added that user there, right? So we have the user here, which is fine. Okay, we can exit the KDC server. Now let's come back to the client. Now, what have we done here? We've added the user into the KDC. We've created the user into the database. Let's test the connection again. It will still give us the same issue. And now, the reason why we're having this issue is because we need to, first of all, obtain the TGT for that user, EDB user. Because the TGT, if we do list K list here, look at what we have here. Now, remember, earlier on when we look at this, we saw that we had only the TGT. It's because we're able now to connect to application that our TGS, our ticket granting server, issued us our service ticket. So we could see that we have now a service ticket to our application, which we use to connect, which is fine, right? So this is two concepts we're getting here. Now, note very well that this information we have here, this TGT we have here is for a user called Benson, as you see it here. As you see the ticket that is cash, is for the user Benson. So this user EDB user cannot use this credential. The EDB user need to obtain his own credentials first. Now let's try now to kind of obtain the credentials for EDB user. You see what will happen. Remember, when we want to obtain the ticket, the authentication issue authentication request, we use a KINIT. Now let's use KINIT for this user, and you see what is going to happen here. It asks for the password, issue the password. Now look at what is happening. It says password authentication, password incorrect while getting. Uh, let's try that again. EDB user, let's put correct password. Okay, it has obtained that. Let's do klist. So we see now that we have a TGT for the user, EDB user right now. Okay, so now we've obtained that for the EDB user and we've cached that. Now let's attempt our connection now. Now let's attempt this connection now. We should be able to work. You see, now we are connected. All right, and we can see that our connection is also encrypted as well. All right, connection is also encrypted as well, so everything is working fine. So guys, I don't want to make the video too long, but I hope you enjoy it, and this is how you can be able to run that that configuration. If you have any issues, you can ping me and let know. So let me just go ahead and stop the sharing, and I can stop it, and I can stop